Are you being called a narcissist? Or do you turn around every single time and you have a difficult moment and say that you're suffering a trauma? Or maybe you know somebody that has a bad experience and you just turn around and say to them, you must be going through PTSD. Or is this just being human? This is the show called Stop Diagnosing Me, and we're going to handle some of the labels that we throw around that we're not really sure we have. Today, we're going to tackle narcissism, PTSD, and trauma. This is Ellen Stewart, the pushy broad from the Bronx. Welcome to my show, Recovery Recharged. We're in part 2 of the 2-part special, Stop Diagnosing Me. And we're handling those diagnoses today. I have a very dear friend of mine who is a clinician with us today. Nelson Hadler is a licensed clinical social worker. He's going to give us the difference between normal behavior and clinical trusted diagnoses. He is a LCSW. He's a licensed certified alcohol and drug counselor. So he'll give us the recovery perspective. He has over 30 years in the industry in addictions and mental health. And he's here to tell us, is this normal behavior or do you truly have a personality disorder? So we have discussed in our previous episode ADD, OCD, and bipolar, but now this is the bandied word. This is the word that everybody uses all the time, 99.9% of the time, to describe men. Nelson, tell us about the word narcissist and what the clinical diagnosis for narcissistic behavior would be.
Again, all of these diagnoses happen on a spectrum, so a lot of times people might not meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, but be somewhat narcissistic, self-centered. You want to take a look at, is the person capable of any empathy? That's my big one. Maybe they don't act like they care, but if you go, when you spend the day, polishing the Corvette and showing it off to the neighbors and telling them how great you are, your wife feels neglected, and they might go, oh, I never realized that. Okay, then the person's a little self-centered. If they go, I don't care, I polish my Corvette and show the neighbors, and get defensive, then they might be narcissistic.
Right, I understand. Well, I think empathy is a really big thing because I do also see in narcissistic behavior a little bit of egotistical behavior. It's more than just feeling how good I am. It's feeling that I'm on a pedestal above everybody else. So I see that too in narcissistic behavior.
Right.
Also, there is a self-centeredness that is indisputable. And it always goes back to, how does this affect me? What can you do for me? And very little concern for everybody around you, which is the empathy that you're talking about, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. So, how would you determine whether or not it's narcissistic behavior or everyday behavior, in addition to empathy? What else do you see that would make somebody maybe not be a narcissist? Not only the empathy, but maybe consideration, because I sometimes see that too.
Oh, I mean, their ability to take into consideration another person's feelings?
Yes, care,
Yeah,
but not only empathy. Yeah, go ahead.
Especially if pointed out.
Yes, but even if it's pointed out, because I think that narcissists are extremely good manipulators. I mean, I just think that they know how to elicit responses that they need to get. Okay. I think narcissism also goes hand in hand with a sense of gaslighting and a sense
I was going to
of,
say, yeah.
all of those things. So I think that if I pointed out to a narcissist that, maybe your wife needs a little bit more consideration, or maybe the kids need a little bit more attention, I think that person may do something perfunctory, but then go back and go about their normal behavior. Have you found that? Think about a true narcissist that you've had sitting in front of you as a client. You've spent 30 years with somebody that you consider to be a true narcissist. Call on that behavior a little bit and tell me what you see.
Again, I keep going back to it. I don't know why, but like even when pointed out, they can't see it. You know, they are actually, can cause harm, and not, the lack of empathy,
Okay, well, that's a
and
really big thing.
the degree to which.
Okay, but what you said is really important, and a little bit more than you said before, because what their behavior can cause harm.
Yeah.
That's something that comes hand in hand with a narcissist, and not only somebody that's just not being considerate.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
There's a distinctive approach to do harm, maybe, not even realizing it, but their insensitivity and their egotistical and defensive and attention seeking behavior can definitely be harmful. So those are really big things, more than if you constantly have to point out to somebody that they're not being empathetic enough, that they're not being considerate enough, then there is a clear argument that this certainly is a personality disorder, I would say. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Persistent narcissistic
Consistent.
traits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And I mean, we don't want to overdiagnose, but I think the popularization of identifying people as narcissists has helped partners in relationships identify that this is narcissistic emotional abuse. This isn't me. I mean, a lot of people will throw out, my spouse is narcissistic, but you need to look into it further,
Yes, and it
Are they
has to
showing
have
all those things? And, like, the gaslight meter.
exactly.
You know?
That behavior was controlling. He repeatedly lied to me. He manipulated me, all of those things, or she manipulated me, or she makes me think that I'm crazy, all of these
Right.
things. Not caring, not spending enough time at all with me, always craving personal admiration as opposed to someone else, not really caring about anybody other than themselves. The world is definitely revolving around themselves. Okay?
Right.
All right. So now, people say that addiction can make people incredibly self-centered.
Well, yeah.
Okay. So does that mean that addicts have a propensity to be narcissists?
I don't think chicken or egg. I don't think narcissism necessarily causes addiction, but
Okay.
addiction can make someone look like a narcissist because they become self-centered.
Okay. Yes, no, I don't think that addicts are necessarily
No.
narcissistic. I think that's a totally and completely separate trait, because most of the time, addiction sometimes goes in the other way. I think the biggest craving and the biggest self-centeredness is for the mood-altering substance, and not necessarily for the personality stuff that's coming
Right.
around. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because usually there are so many other things going on. Okay. All right. But it's also, like you said, very easy to misdiagnose someone to be narcissistic. So, and like you said, I think the biggest things that we have to look at is that person narcissistic, which comes hand in hand with mean behavior, with hurtful behavior.
Yes.
That goes hand in hand. Could
Yes.
you tell us what a malignant narcissist is?
A malignant narcissist.
Hmm?
I can't say I've heard the term before, but
Okay.
I would guess it means uncurable.
Yes, I would say so.
So I mean, if you truly personality disorders, usually you're born with a set of traits that can develop into the personality disorder. So
Okay.
it's somewhat genetic. but I tend to look at it as not being totally genetic. As I said before, if you're born with certain traits and you mix them up with the right ingredients, set the timer and the temperature just right, you might get a narcissist. You turn the
Okay.
temp up, you might get a sociopath, you know.
I I understand. Okay, I hear you. Do you think that narcissism can be something that can be brought up in your environment? Can you be raised in a situation where you're raised by a narcissist and maybe you're getting those traits that you didn't have before? Do we think it can be acquired, or do you think it is genetic and hereditary?
Oh, I think it can be acquired. I mean, let's say you have the gene, and so does your father, and you grew up with that behavior. You might mimic that behavior.
Okay. Okay.
You know,
Has it been your experience that you have been able to help the narcissist put their behavior in remission?
no,
Okay, so once a narcissist, always a
no. I mean,
narcissist.
most personality disorders, you can't cure it. You're teaching the person coping skills.
Okay, and of course, the narcissist has to be willing to learn those coping skills,
Right,
which
and
means
they're
they first
usually
have to
not, so it's
admit,
very hard.
yeah, they first have to admit that they need help in the
Yeah,
first place.
they
Yes.
they first have to acknowledge it.
Right, I understand. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. Okay, all right. So let's there's something else too, but let's move on to trauma. Okay, now
Okay.
trauma technically is of course a very painful experience, right? So trauma can be defined in many different ways, and is trauma the same as PTSD? What's your clinical opinion? Is it the same thing as post-traumatic stress disorder? Tell us if there's a difference.
Yeah, trauma is the event. Post-traumatic stress disorder is the diagnosis.
Okay, so that's very, very clear. Let's say that again. Trauma is
Right.
the
Trauma
event.
is the event. Post-traumatic stress disorder is the diagnosis.
There you go. Okay, so
And you need the event to have the diagnoses. But I found, even in the DSM, they have a lot of rules around what qualifies as trauma. I look more at what are the symptoms.
and what are the symptoms?
Um, So, post traumatic stress disorder, I would say the symptoms are the biggest symptom is disassociation, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, avoidance of the stimuli, you
Okay,
know, and it often develops into depression, and the person can become suicidal if it's not dealt with.
okay,
But I mean, a lot of people, I always say this about trauma. We can take five five people that were exposed to the same combat trauma and take a look at them clinically 5 years later. One of them might be fine without any intervention. One or two might be doing better with therapy. One or two might be basket cases for the rest of their lives. So it really depends on the person's what they bring to the trauma, what their response is.
and of course, maybe what kind of help they get around it, how they work through it. Yes.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I get a lot of people with loss and trauma. Again, the line blurs a little bit, but the retired person at 60 all of a sudden starts to get depressed and have you tried medication? And I'm running through everything and I'm like, let's talk about your childhood. Any traumas or losses? Oh, my mom died when I was one. My dad died when I was two. My grandmother took care of me, but she was raped and had to go to. I mean, it's like, what? I'm like, how have
Right.
you dealt with this? She's like, well, I just kind of dealt with it. I'm
Right.
like, okay, well, it's all bubbling up now.
Now.
I see that
Right.
a lot. You know,
Okay, well, that's a very important thing because if we're looking at our trauma, if we're looking at the post traumatic stress symptoms, we have to ask ourselves if there are some unusual things that are occurring now that maybe didn't recur before. It's kind of like going into hibernation. They're not there until something triggers them, which is, just what you were saying.
well,
And
yeah,
then to take a look at our family systems. What has happened in our past? Because trauma
right.
comes from a past event. And sometimes that past is, is very early childhood that just surfaces, like you said. So we
Yes.
really do have to look and see if our behavior is somewhat out of the ordinary in the ways that you mentioned. Sometimes the intrusive thoughts come, sometimes we freeze, sometimes out of the blue, we have changes in thoughts, we have negative thinking, we have changes in our sense of arousal or reactivity, something that is not normal with us, something that changes or something that changes in your child. And then we have to get to the root of what it is.
Right.
Now, I work a lot with women who have gone through mostly mental and sometimes physical abuse in past relationships, so that they do a lot of trauma work with me and also with clinicians, of course, hand in hand, in getting them to move to the next step. Because as a coach, sometimes they want to go back and to hide their trauma in a mood altering substance. So working
Absolutely.
hand in hand with a therapist allows them to get back and go through things.
Right.
So what is the best way? Do you feel that PTSD can actually be worked through? What do you consider a successful experience to move past trauma? Give us an example of what works in treatment.
When okay, well, you got to peel back the layers.
Sure,
You know,
sure,
um, I've had trauma PTSD folks, say, I stopped doing heroin. I'm only smoking a little pot. I'm not as depressed. I'm able to get to work each day.
sure.
Those are all the kind of goals. It's
Yes,
it.
you're right.
You know,
And certainly there's also a difference between remembering something painful and an experience of PTSD flashback, right?
yes.
Okay, so let's maybe try to take one example of that. Maybe a PTSD flashback can involve something very intense, right? That it's exhibiting some of the symptoms we talked about before, as opposed to and a dissociative reaction. In layman's terms, describe for us a dissociative reaction. What happens to the brain and the whole
So in
center
in
here?
in severe trauma, when the trauma occurs, the person, the amygdala and the hippocampus and all work together to react, get the body ready for fight, flight, or freeze. And part of what happens with severe trauma is the mechanism of the brain that sends that to long-term memory doesn't happen.
Okay,
Doesn't
so
get
then what?
recorded. That's a true disassociation.
Okay, okay.
So so it's not a thought. So American Sniper and Chris Kyle, whatever. Here's the lawnmower, and he's not thinking. It's not a thought process. That sounds like a helicopter, and I should be scared of helicopters because they shoot at me. None of that's happening. The emotion is happening directly from the lower part of the brain. It hears that stimulus, and it triggers the flashback. It triggers the blood pressure and all the heart rate and panic attack.
I see. Okay. So it's that part of the brain that is disconnected from
Yeah,
the logical,
right,
reasonable functioning, so to
right.
speak. And that makes it dissociative. Okay. And that's very, very different from recalling the fact that your pet passed away, right?
Yes,
Or you had a
absolutely.
loss, or you lost a job that you really cared about, or you broke up with a relationship, or that person broke up with you. That's very, very different from a post-traumatic stress disorder experience. And
Yes,
that's the thing that we're trying to say today. You don't have to categorize yourself as someone with a PTSD experience, or categorize yourself going through a trauma if it is a normal life event. And that doesn't mean that tragedy and grieving isn't traumatizing to you. But again, it depends upon how much, how long, how intense, and what it's doing to your body and your brain and your ability to function on a daily basis. Would you say?
Right. Yes, I would absolutely say that.
Okay. All right.
You know,
So,
um,
yeah.
a lot of people come to treatment and have never identified themselves as like, I had a trauma. People will present in treatment and then, you'll dig and how was childhood and this losses, anything happened to upset you very much. And all of a sudden this comes out. And I'm like, what?
That's ironic
There's
because it's
some
very
definitely traumatic experience.
right, right, right. And it's very, very true because all of the other stuff and all of the labels, people are very quick to say all of those other things, like, he's a narcissist and all of those things.
Right,
But people are not so quick to say, I was traumatized because a lot of people say, I have this handle just like your 60-year-old. I never even thought that that would be a thing, right? I never even thought that my family systems and everything that happened to me in childhood would be a big thing. And I have a lot of clients that say to me, well, it was no big deal. I had this major car accident when I was 5, but everything is fine. And mom and dad are fine. And I have a great childhood until you unpack all of it to realize that there was major things going
right,
on that a young
right,
child or a young adult did not process, or even an older adult didn't fully process. And that's the thing about trauma. It will come back and rear its ugly head if you don't dissect the cobwebs. You have to get in the trenches and
right,
sort it out. Right.
right.
Sort it out. Okay. All right. So let's move on to something else here on top of it. How often do you think the psychiatric diagnoses in general are misdiagnosed? You think people get it wrong a lot? You think clinicians get it wrong, get it
Oh,
right?
yeah,
What do you think?
absolutely. Especially when mixed with substance abuse.
There you go. So
And
that's a very big
misdiagnosed
deal.
can be overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed.
All right, explain that.
Okay, the person is now being admitted to their fifth rehab where I'm clinical director. I go, why? What isn't working? What are we missing a diagnosis? And maybe they never dealt with the trauma. I mean, this is my message to my clients that are trauma survivors. You have PTSD and are in recovery. You have PTSD. You need to be in therapy for the rest of your life. Meaning they really, because sometimes it'll take years to get to work through the trauma, but they need a person to go to help identify when they're having the symptoms, when they're triggered.
You're absolutely right.
I
Okay.
remember teaching this to a group of people in rehab, in early recovery, and I was talking about triggers and how you can be going along fine, but if you have PTSD, it can be really a real trigger. Then you're off to the races, and then this young 20-something woman stops because Nelson, like, oh my God, you just defined my last relapse. And she went on to say she found a text that looked like a woman was flirting with her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm. I
And
understand.
it was so triggering, she went out and did heroin. And then, you know, a couple days later, she realized it was really innocent, that boyfriend wasn't cheating on her. But
But it spun her out of control,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So
So
in
you can be
general,
kind of functioning, but then triggered. And
right. Well, I think that's why in today's world, especially in recovery, we have noticed that it's not only recovering from a mood altering substance, alcohol, drugs, whatever, but that you and I have talked many times about the fact that dual diagnosis, the personality disorders, coupled with the addiction, are something that has to be looked at treatment centers and through clinicians so that both sides have to be examined because both sides are equally responsible for the most accurate diagnosis. So a
Yes.
more a clinician works with you, the better information they can obtain, the better a treatment center can obtain to be able to treat the entire person, personality disorder, mood altering substances, and all of those things together. So now, because school is here and we have a few minutes, I want to ask just a couple of quick questions. Now that parents are sending their kids back to school, do you think it's a good recommendation to have a child mentally healthy and maybe have an evaluation or a reevaluation? What happens if
Well, I'm
somebody
sorry. If they're mentally
if
healthy?
a child is presenting some of the symptoms that we've talked
Oh,
about, do you think it's important for them to have a mental health evaluation?
yes.
Okay. So that's something that they should handle through their school and also through private clinicians as well, which is really
Can be both.
important.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, how often do you think, in general, mental health diagnosis should be reevaluated? Let's say from childhood to early adulthood. What do you think? How often does one usually get reevaluated?
Well, for ongoing clients, the evaluation's ongoing. you know,
Okay.
um, I think it all depends on the circumstances. You know, if if the child was diagnosed with ADHD, but the parents opted never to put them on medicine at 6 years old, and they're in ninth grade and they're getting all A's. I don't know what that was before, but
Okay.
if it works, don't fix it. You know,
Okay. Right. You're
if
exactly
if,
right.
if the problem persists, then you might want to have a reevaluation to see if we're barking up the wrong tree.
Of course, I understand. And with that, the whole big discussion, medication, no medication, depends upon each individual child, each
Yes,
individual diagnosis, a clinician's opinion, and also all of the new substances here that you have to weigh against how the child will react to each medication. I
right.
understand that. Okay. So in general, because we've got about 30 seconds left, the most important thing I think we've gotten from all of this is not to confuse mental health with diagnosing everyone around you, right? We
Right.
can't give somebody a diagnosis just because of that. And then in summation, there was something you said before, I just want you to reiterate that it depends upon how you're functioning now. So just give us a general statement about that.
If the old behaviors have abated and you're functioning, your activities of daily living are fine, it's not getting in the way, or it's addressable. You're not on meds, but you've taken a DBT skills group and using those skills is working. That type of thing.
And that's the kind of thing where you shouldn't pre-diagnose and you shouldn't
Right.
think that you're stuck in one particular behavior.
Right.
I cannot thank you enough for being here today. Stop diagnosing yourself, okay? Get professional help with clinicians like Nelson Hadler, which are licensed, I think, in New Jersey and Florida right now. New Jersey and Florida
Colorado and New
and
York is coming
Colorado
up.
and New York is on the way, so you
On
can
the way.
find him. Nelson Hadler. Thank you so much. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad, saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a stray dog and I. She's a pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised if you wanna listen twice. Make decisions, find the right choice. Know yourself better, find your own voice. It's okay if you need help today, cause everybody needs a little push. From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.